It's time to chill out and get ready for a mediocre Q&A live stream. If you're old enough, grab yourself your favorite adult beverage, and if you're not, stick with apple juice. Put your feet up and relax. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. And now let's cue up the intro music. Yo, hopefully you guys are hanging in there. It's going okay over here. Nothing too crazy. Just another week. Thank you so very much for that super chat, Big Pond Cable Guy. That is awesome. I'm going to start this off by addressing that. I really do appreciate all the support that you guys give this channel. It is an awesome thing. It is not needed, but it's much appreciated. My wife so secretly passed me my hot tea. So, and no, that was not vodka that I was drinking. That is water in a mason jar. So it's not White Lightning or anything like that, okay? But yeah, no, I am in the mood for some hot tea right now. And actually, I probably should take the lid off for a few minutes. I know that sounds ridiculous because I'll probably end up spilling it. But if I don't, then I'm going to give some people some great meme material when I freak out and drink my hot tea. So again, you guys, thank you so much for the channel support. Okay, there's been tons of support rolling in from so many different ways that people can. And again, I know I said this on the last stream. I don't really address it enough, but the Patreon supporters, you guys are awesome. Okay, thank you so very much. The YouTube channel members, the same. It is amazing. Okay, people that are giving super chats, you guys, it is awesome. Thank you so much. And then the people that purchase merch from my website. You guys, you realize that you don't even have to financially donate to the channel to support it, okay? Simply watching the videos, and I know this sucks, but watch the commercials. Let YouTube pay me. It helps, okay? Every little bit helps because there is a lot of time involved in these, but I'm going to make it completely clear right now, and I've said this many times before, and I'll say it again. Even if there wasn't channel support coming in, I really do enjoy making these videos, and I would continue making them, okay? So it's just an added bonus when it does come in, all right? You guys, thank you so very much. Middle picture diagnosis. I like your little emoji thing. That is awesome. That is cool. You guys are getting super creative with your little emojis and stuff. That is awesome. But yes, you guys, it is amazing. Okay. And thank you so very much from the bottom of my heart. All right. I really appreciate it. But yeah, if you watch the commercials, let YouTube do it. It's awesome. Okay. That's the easiest way to support the channel. All right. So let's start this off right as usual. I've been doing this a lot more lately. I'm just an HVACR service technician. I'm a tech just like you guys, okay? I make mistakes and I try to learn from those mistakes and I try to share those mistakes. HVACR Wiz, thank you so very much for that super chat, okay? I try to learn from my mistakes. I try to share my mistakes. The whole point of this YouTube channel was training aid for my own employees. I made the channel public. The channel grew. It's become this machine that it has become. And I still just try to share my daily service calls and my mistakes, okay? I am not perfect. I make mistakes every single day. Let's talk about something that I did today. So today I was on a compressor lift, okay? I'd been talking about doing this compressor lift. If you follow my social media or any of my other YouTube channel feeds, I'm on the HVAC Overtime show on the HVAC Overtime YouTube channel. I've been talking about this compressor lift that I was getting ready to do, and I built a little custom gantry out of Unistrut, okay? Tested it out and everything was good. Well, when I went to go do the lift today, what I found was I didn't have enough support on the bottom of the gantry. I was still able to do the lift, but I had to do it very carefully because the gantry was kind of flexing a little bit here and there because I needed some crossbars to support the bottom. I had a T basically connecting the bottom piece of Unistrut that was sitting on the ground to the vertical piece that's going straight up, and it was just flexing a little bit back and forth too much. So I had to very carefully finish the lift because I was already in it to win it. I went ahead and finished it, and I was also fighting my little trolley that I had put up there, kind of moving around. We learn from our mistakes, guys, okay? Now, I knew that lift wasn't going to go perfect, okay? Nobody got hurt. We were very safe. We had protection, PPE, and all that stuff, okay? But I knew it wasn't going to go perfect, and I tried to prepare for anything bad that would happen, okay? So it's, in my opinion, if you could at least be aware of your surroundings and be aware of potential problems. I kind of had an idea that the legs might flex a little bit, okay? And I was kind of ready for it, and I was monitoring it and being very careful and, just trying to be cautious. Again, I'm not perfect. I'm not this perfect this person that makes this perfect thing every single time, okay? When I posted a picture of that gantry on Instagram, it's really easy for people to say, that's the most amazing thing. You're so brilliant. I'm not brilliant, okay? I learned about that by simply Google searching, heavy lift ideas, how to lift something safely without hurting my back, okay? I research stuff just like you guys, okay? So I just try to share the mistakes that I make with you guys, and I try to, be forthcoming with everybody and just let them know, right? So I was able to safely do the compressor lift. Now, why did I build a gantry? Why did I use a pulley system? Okay, it was just a 75-pound compressor, and I posted an Instagram post today saying, you know what? In the past, I would have just grabbed that rope and lifted that compressor up. But you know what? The older I get, the more I'm concerned about my health, okay? And it's sad that we have to realize that as we get older and older. My back starts to hurt every day. Little things start to happen, and I worry about my future. I already am losing my hearing. I've gotten more things than I can count in my eyes. I've gone to the urgent care so many times to get things picked out of my eyeballs. I'm lucky I can see out of my eyes, okay? And that's because, some of the times I wasn't wearing safety glasses, or other times I was wearing safety glasses and the dang things went around the safety glasses. But still, okay? I'm so concerned about my health these days, and I wish I was more concerned when I was younger. Okay, because maybe, and I don't know this for sure, but maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't be losing my hearing like I am. Maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't have all this scar tissue on my eye, or eyes, I should say, or retina, or whatever you want to call it. Okay, it's kind of funny because every time I go into the urgent care, it's funny. The doctor, I can tell you the whole process. I could probably do it to someone as many times as it's been done to me. I go into a dark room. The doctor puts a fluorescent dye in my eyeball. He drops 2 drops on there. I close my eyes. He puts a black light and looks at my eyeballs, and he says every time, "Wow, there's a lot of scar tissue on your eyeball." Yeah, I know. It's because of every time I've hurt myself, So if I could give any advice to any of the younger guys, is take your time, be safe. And I mean, within reason, guys, okay? A 75-pound compressor, that one's pushing the limit. Yes, I've done something that heavy before, but I've regretted it. My arms were jello when I was done. I'm shaking. There's no reason for that. I've pushed things up the side of the building on extension ladders, doing ridiculously stupid things, guys. Those things that you see memes made out of, I've done that stuff. Having one guy put his hands on the bottom of the condensing unit, actually, I was that one guy, I think, walking up the ladder with just my hands underneath it. That was the stupidest thing I've probably ever done in my life, okay? I wasn't concerned about safety, and I should have been, okay? So that's why I built a gantry. That's why I got a pulley system. So that way I wasn't roping that. I wasn't putting that all on my weight, and I was trying to be careful. But even trying to be careful and being concerned about my health, I still make mistakes in the way that I built the gantry. But it was okay, okay? I was prepared, and I was aware of what was going on, and I was very careful, and everything went well, okay? But, you know, we just got to be more concerned about ourselves, okay? The job is important, okay? And I say within reason because, you know, come on, a 30-pound compressor, you can probably lift that, okay? So within reason, I'm not telling you. But it's interesting because when I posted, you know, it's really easy for people on social media, and I'm not paying attention to the chat at the moment, but I'll look at it in a minute. But it's really easy for keyboard warriors and people on social media to judge. You know, when I posted a picture of that and they said, oh, no, I just make my boss get a crane. Well, you know, you don't know the circumstances, and you can't always get a crane. And sometimes you got to do what you got to do, okay? So in this situation, this was a 5-story building. The crane that they would have needed to lift on top of this building would have come in 2 pieces to lift a 75-pound compressor? No, not going to happen, okay? So we had to do what we had to do, okay? And we safely built a gantry system that we were able to use some pulleys and rope the compressor onto the roof, okay? But again, there was you know, mistakes that happened, but it's okay. Nobody was hurt. We were safe. All is well, okay? So I really appreciate you guys making it to this live stream. I'm going to go back and forth between my list of things to talk about and the chat. So let's go ahead and look at the chat because there's a lot of stuff that I missed in here. If I miss your guys's, first off, if you guys have questions or things you want me to address, put them in caps lock, okay? That's the best way to get my attention. If I don't address it, you can keep posting it in caps lock until myself or one of the moderators tells you to stop, okay? If I miss your question, feel free to send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com, and I'll try to get back with you. I know I'm behind on my emails, guys. It's starting to get kind of crazy. I remember hearing a story from an acquaintance of mine. I personally don't know him. I met him one time, a couple times actually. Andrew Greaves. He has a YouTube channel called HVAC. He hasn't made videos in a very long time, but I remember him talking about the amount of emails that he gets, and I've now reached that level where I'm getting that amount of emails. There must be 10 emails a day, you know, that I don't get to pay attention to because I'm at work, so they just come, you know, compile and build up until I have a ridiculous amount of emails and then chats and different things like that. So I apologize if I don't get it to it. But even with the emails and the chats, guys, if I don't answer your questions, just keep resending them. Eventually you'll get my attention, okay? Until I tell you to stop, basically, all right? So I always make GIFs out of myself or memes or whatever you call those things. So all right, let me see what we got in here. Oh, yeah, okay. The master of everything. You loved how I kicked it to try to stop the vibration sound on that condensing unit that was next to my unit? Yeah. All right. Let me see. Each section weighed about 5,000 pounds, had a 300-pound... Yeah, that's crazy, Joe. That's a heavy lift, bud. That is a heavy lift. So, all right. Let me see what I'm missing in here. I appreciate everybody that's in here. This is awesome, guys. Okay, cool. I'm going to go ahead and get to my list of things to talk about right now. So I had a couple videos, and I was able to do a couple live stream service calls this last time too. So since, I want to say since the last live stream. Yeah. So I had 2 live stream service calls and 2 videos. Okay. The live stream service calls, when I can do them, guys, I will. And I'm still trying to figure out the whole audio. We're really limited by the audio and the internet service. So I'll do what I can when I can. Okay. But I also have to be careful too, because the live stream stuff, you know, I like to make the videos too, so it's just a fun thing. But anyways, the live streams, they worked out pretty decent, you know, they were all right. And as far as so the first live stream was on 9/28. It was a live service call where we had bad condenser fan motors on the walk-in cooler that I recently replaced a compressor on. It was actually, well, it wasn't recently, but it was my most recent video before 9/28. I think it was released on 9/27. And it's funny because I considered changing those condenser fan motors when I changed the compressor, but I was like, I'm going to let it go. And then a couple months later, condenser fan motor died. Okay. And then I went ahead and changed them both. Now, when I did that, I ended up having them get the electrician to come out and replace the breaker. Now, I mentioned in the live stream video that when I got there, the breaker was tripped. I ohmed everything out. There was no direct shorts to ground. So therefore, I tried to reset the breaker and it wouldn't reset. It just kept tripping, but nothing was grounded. So I pulled the breaker out of the panel because I've had this issue at that restaurant before, and the breaker was full of sand. I shook a little pile of sand out of that circuit breaker. Even with the cover on that panel, the sand just goes around and gets in those breakers. It's kind of crazy what desert sand can do. So let me see. See, do people refer to neutral as common? This always throws you off. Yeah, that is a very, and I used to do it too. So yes, technically neutral is on a 115 volt circuit, but oftentimes, you know, people refer to the neutral on a 208 volt circuit too, but it's really the common on a 208 volt circuit, but you'll get conflicting things. So what I try to say is if I'm talking about a 115 volt circuit, I'll call it a neutral, but it can also be called a common. It's confusing. Okay. You can also have a common terminal on a switch. Okay. So that's another confusing thing. So it definitely gets confusing, and it probably slips out of my mouth quite a bit too. So, all right. Let me see what I'm missing in here. I really appreciate that there, Transit Biker. Thank you so much, bud. Let me see what else. How long have I been using my DTEC Select? I could probably say the DTEC Select has been used probably 2 or 3 times I've replaced it, but it's probably over the last 10 years I've probably been using that thing. Now, I will say, I mentioned this on another stream the other night. I had the opportunity to use someone else's Infocon Stratus, okay, which is Infocon is the manufacturer of the DTEC Select leak detector, okay? The DTEC Select is actually being replaced by the Infocon 3, I believe is the name, which essentially is my understanding, this is the way I understand it, I could be completely wrong, but my understanding is the same sensor that's in the Stratus is in the Infocon 3, but the Infocon 3 just doesn't have the ppm display. That is what I've understood to be the difference between the Infocon Stratus and the Infocon 3. So I had the opportunity to use the Infocon Stratus, very cool leak detector. It found leaks that my DTEC Select could not find. Okay, so I was working on a 410A evaporator coil that had leaks in the middle of the fin pack, and they were slow leaks. And what's interesting was the Infocon Stratus was able to find the leaks very easily. Now, once I found them and found out where they were, I was able to take my DTEC Select and put it up to the leak, and it found it, but it's just the Stratus found it a lot quicker, and I was able to breeze by it, okay? So I honestly am probably going to consider buying, how many times can I say that? But I'm probably going to buy the Stratus when sometime soon, because my DTEC Select, I kind of feel like it's about time to buy a new sensor for it. And I think I might retire the DTEC Select, which has been an amazing leak detector for many years. So if you guys are looking into a leak detector, I would strongly urge you guys to look into the Infocon 3, I think is what it's called. Or if you want to step it up to the parts per million readout, go with the Stratus. Okay, I believe the Infocon 3, I think I looked today, it's right around the same price as the DTEC Select. It's 400 and some change, but I believe the Stratus is almost 800, so it's pretty expensive for the Stratus. So, all right, what causes scroll compressors to leak at the head of the compressor? That's a very interesting one. I don't know, bud. I don't know where it's leaking on the head. I mean, that's pretty crazy. Can't say that I've really seen a scroll compressor leak on the head. Maybe you should send me an email or some pictures, and I could look at them a little bit more. Let's see if I burn my mouth with my tea. Hey, that's apple tea. I thought I was getting chamomile tea. Well, thank you for the apple tea. All right, let's see what else we got in here. You're currently working with a residential light commercial company up to 20 tons. Your 1-year experience running by yourself, thinking of making the jump to only commercial company. I think it's worth it. Jordan, really it depends on your experience and what you feel comfortable with and what's best for you and your own, basically, or you and your family, okay? I can't make that decision for you. 1 year of experience, I would caution you to be careful about jumping ship too quickly, because you still definitely have a lot of things to learn. But if you feel like you're not learning enough at the company you're at, then, that's something to consider. Okay. But I come from the generation of people that doesn't jump ship every 5 minutes. Okay. And I'm not saying that you're wrong for doing so. I'm just saying that, there's some people that literally you can look at their resume and it's like, dude, you've been a technician for 10 years, but you've worked at 7 different companies. Like, what's going on here? And then if they have a valid reason as to why, hey, I started in supermarkets, it was too much work, I decided to go to residential, which was a ridiculously silly decision, so then I went back to commercial. I mean, and they tell me that kind of stuff, okay, but to jump ship, and I'm not saying this is you, but I'm just saying to jump ship for 50 cents an hour, 50 cents an hour, 50 cents an hour, you got to be cautious about that because it does reflect a little differently on a resume. At the same time, that is something that as a hiring person, we have to kind of learn to get used to is that more and more resumes this day have more companies on them. Whereas in the past, technicians had loyalty. Whether or not that loyalty was justified, I don't know. I understand there's two sides to it. Sometimes companies can take advantage of people, all sorts of things. Okay. So you kind of got to weigh out the factors. What's best for you and your own? Are you learning? Is there growth potential? That kind of stuff. And if not, then yeah, maybe you need to make a decision on whether or not it's right to move on. Okay. So if I didn't answer that enough, send me an email. Okay. All right. Let me see what else we got going on here. All right. I'm going to get to my list. Yeah, guys, if you could please smash the thumbs up button. It really does help the stream. Okay. So the ice machine is empty was another video where I installed 2 temperature controllers. Okay, this one needs some clarification because there was a lot of questions. So I had a service call on a Hoshizaki ice machine. It was really weird because it made a batch of ice when I turned it on. Couldn't figure out what was going on, but I put my service gauges on it and the head pressure looked a tad bit high. So I went ahead and jumped onto the roof and I noticed that 2 of the 3 condenser fan motors for the refrigeration rack were not running, okay? This is where it gets kind of confusing for people. So they have a rack with a common condenser. What I mean by common, there's separate circuits in the condenser, but it was common, meaning it was the same slab coil, okay? So each condensing unit or each circuit was independent of the others, okay, but it was just one common condenser, therefore it shared 3 condenser fan motors. One condenser fan motor runs 24/7 and the other 2 are staged via temperature controllers. So they had mechanical temperature controllers that had a lot of drift in them. They weren't very accurate anymore, so I went back with digital controllers. Now this is where the confusion comes in. A lot of people didn't understand why we had temperature controllers shutting off the condenser fan motors. Okay, so those of you that have experience with cold zone refrigeration racks, if you're already experienced with them, you know that majority of the time the cold zone refrigeration racks are grossly oversized, okay? You typically tend to run, Rick, thank you so very much for that super chat. That is awesome, bud. So on cold zone racks, they typically oversize their condensers already, all right? And then at that, they stage the condenser fan motors down, okay? But we also have head pressure control valves on all the condensers, even the ice machines within that rack. So we stage the condenser fan motors down to try to maintain proper head pressure, proper oil return for when it gets cool outside, basically, okay? But this is where people get confused. Inside the condenser, each condenser fan motor is not partitioned off from the other ones. It's one common space in there, okay? So when one condenser fan motor stages down, it's not like everything shuts down, okay? It just raises the head pressure slowly to everything, okay, in that rack. So it's not like we're just shutting off everything and just driving the head pressure up, okay? No, you're slowly staging it down, okay? But it's a giant common space in there. I guess I should have shown it on video because it probably would have made a little bit more sense to people, okay? Let's see what else I got in here. I'm not missing anything as of yet. Thank you, guys. The likes are definitely going up. Keep smashing that like button. It'd be awesome, guys, okay? The next video that I did was a live service call with burnt wires on a 15-ton split system, okay? That was Saturday evening. Saturday evening. And that one was a service call where I got up onto the roof. We had 3 ACs down. Each one of them had a very similar electrical short where let's call it line 1, the black wire coming in, or phase 1 or phase A was burnt on each contactor going for each AC. Okay, on one of them the contactor was salvaged, the other 2 the contactors were bad. So I turned live on the 3rd AC unit when I was replacing the contactor. I showed a little trick about the contactor that came with screws because I did not have a contactor with lugs and I needed one with lugs. Well, I happened to have another contactor that was the wrong voltage that had lugs on it. And you can actually remove the lugs from those. There's a little screw down in there, and I showed how you can swap those out. So that is a little trick to get you out of a pinch if you ever needed to, okay? So I was able to use a 24-volt contactor that had screws when I got it, but I was able to put lugs on it so that way I could use it in the situation that I needed to. Got the customer going. I was actually back at the job site today. They have no complaints. Let me see what I'm missing inside of here. Let's see. Refrigerant Mark, you're saying a walk-in freezer pumps down to 5 psi, immediately starts back up. Low pressure rises, repeats until pressure stays low enough. Confirm good liquid line solenoid valve, compressor, and DTC unit short cycles. Set low pressure to 30 and 3 psi. Thoughts? Does it have a scroll compressor, Mark? Scroll compressors do not like pumping down to 3 psi. If it's a reciprocating compressor, shutting it down to 3 psi, sure. I don't know your situation, but going further with your question, the cut-in temperature, cut-in pressure of 30 psi, it depends on your refrigerant, your ambient, and your box temperature, because you have to remember that when the solenoid valve opens, the pressure of the refrigerant drives the refrigerant through the system. If it's really, really cold outside, the refrigerant's not going to have very much, the temperature is going to affect the pressure in the system basically, and it's not going to drive that refrigerant sometimes fast enough. So you have to look at your pressure temperature chart and look at the saturation temperatures of the refrigerant at ambient temperature and box temp to make sure that you're going to have enough pressure to drive that refrigerant through the system. I'm assuming you'll probably answer my question about whether or not it's a scroll compressor. But if it's a scroll compressor, in my experience, the scroll compressors don't like to pump down past 10 psi. Anything below that, the scroll set's going to open and the pressures inside are going to internally equalize. That's when you hear that sound, kind of like a blow-off valve, where it equalizes the pressures out, and then you have that constant on-off, 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 on-off. Now, again, I don't know if you said it's a scroll or not. Let me see if I missed this in here yet. No, you didn't tell me if it was a scroll or not, Mark, but you got to be careful on those scrolls, okay? Also, Copeland has a service bulletin out there on the scroll compressors where they actually want you to install a time delay relay, which does help with the short cycling on those things. So, any ideas what more can be done during a PM? What do you expect? What do I expect my guys to do for PMs? You know, a PM, Randy, depends on every single different location and what the customer wants to pay for me to do, okay? Most customers, they come to you with a not to exceed value or some sort of a price, and they say, this is what we want to pay. What can you do? Okay, so therefore we tailor the PM service to give them the best bang for your buck. If I had unlimited funds, we'd spend 8 hours on every package unit. And I mean, that's not realistic. So, you know, it really depends on what the customer is willing to pay for. For the most part, though, most of my customers pay for just like a real quick generic PM service where we go onto the roof, we change all the filters, we hose off the condensers, we brush the evaporators. We typically don't wash evaporators. We blow drains out. We check and tighten belts if possible. Look at electrical connections. We're not necessarily torquing down on everything. They typically don't want you to apply service gauges or anything like that. We just check temperature splits across the supply and return. When it's operating, go downstairs, change the filter media on the reach-in coolers, open up the ice machine, make sure it doesn't look horrendous. Typically, ice machine cleanings aren't on a PM service. We'll clean condensers downstairs if necessary, but we typically don't use coil cleaner or anything on a PM downstairs. This is what most of my customers are paying for. Check the walk-ins out, pour hot water down the drains, just make sure temperatures look decent, but we're not checking temperatures of every single unit. We usually rely on the customer to tell us if they've been having temperature issues. Check thermostat times, and that's pretty much it. I mean, there's more, depending on the customer. So, Alex, thank you so very much for that super chat. That is awesome, bud. You are awesome. It is much appreciated, okay? Let's see what else. Can I use a reciprocating compressor on a walk-in cooler? Yes, you can. A compressor is a compressor. So, have I ever worked on a mini portable ice maker? No, I have not worked on a mini portable ice maker. I know they make like countertop ones and stuff for like homes, but I've never worked on one of those. Nope, I never have. Put in a new low pressure control according to what was there. Someone has eliminated the time delay relay 404, -10, 80 degree ambient. Refrigerant Mark, unless it's a beacon system or an intelligent system or a smart evaporator, there's no reason to eliminate the time delay. If you're working on an intelligent heatcraft system or a beacon or a QRC system, then they want you to take the time delay relay out. But for the most part, that time delay relay is there for a reason, to help with the short cycling. Let me see what else we got in here. Flash Focus, thank you so very much for that super chat. That is awesome. So you said you accidentally stuck a temperature probe into the squirrel cage fan of a brand new mini split. Oh, that's a bummer, bud. Yeah, that is a bummer. Yeah, I've been concerned about that sometimes, you know, pushing probes in too far and causing issues. What is the current price for a generic PM these days in California? Again, that depends on the restaurant and what they want to pay. What I just described a few minutes ago would probably run the customer, depending on how often they want to do it too. Because if a customer's only doing a PM 2 times a year, it's actually going to cost them more money every PM because we're going to have more work to do. If they're doing a monthly PM of what I described, changing filters, doing all that kind of stuff, it's probably going to cost them $400 to $600 a month, something like that. It really depends, but it's going to change via region. If they're doing it quarterly, the price is going to go up per PM, and as as they reduce the amount of PMs, the price is going to go up every single maintenance. So a lot of customers don't really understand that. They'll be like, well, wait, we want to save money, so we want to reduce our PM services, and we only want to do 4 PMs a year instead of 6 or 8. Okay, so the price of each PM is now going to go up so much because we still have to do the same amount of work, but now you're going to do it less. Now, they may save a little bit of money, but it's still going to cost them more, you know? And they're like, well, that's kind of frustrating. It's like, well, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, unless they want us to do less, then sure, the price will go down, but the repair prices are going to go up, you know? Interesting. All right, let me see what else we got in here. I know I'm missing stuff. How do I set up a CPR valve? Okay, so a CPR valve, this is a little difficult. I'm not going to get crazy into this, but essentially a CPR valve, or a crankcase pressure regulator, is there to reduce the refrigerant, the amount of refrigerant coming back on a hot pull down, okay, or reduce the volume coming back on a hot pull down. Essentially, if you overload the compressor on a hot pull down, let's just say that you have a giant walk-in cooler and it gets to 80 degrees in there because you leave it off for a very long time and you turn it on, that thing's going to be under a heavy load. The compressor is going to overamp. It's going to have issues, okay? So a crankcase pressure regulator in that situation, you would set it up via basically looking at the RLA of the compressor, okay? What the manufacturer recommends the current draw should be under a load, okay? And you're going to dial in or adjust the crankcase pressure regulator to that current draw. So basically you put an amp clamp on the compressor. When it's under a heavy load, you start it up and you turn the crankcase pressure regulator's knob in there, okay, until the current draw drops down to where it should be. And it's now essentially holding back the refrigerant, I guess, in a way. That's not really the technical term, but it's reducing the amount of refrigerant coming back to try to reduce the load on the compressor, okay? That's the easiest explanation I can give you over a live stream. But the manufacturer has instructions on how to do that. It's really easy. And you should be able to Google that. Just go to Sporlan Valve, go to their website, Sporlan.com. My gosh, why I couldn't think of that. Go to their website, look at the CPR valves, and it'll tell you how to install them and how to, you know, set them up. Let me see what I'm missing in here. Let me see. What? Okay, you're not an HVAC tech, but you're curious if I can use 2 vacuum pumps at the same time. I don't see why you couldn't use 2 vacuum pumps at the same time, but honestly, for the most part, I can't think of a situation where you need 2 vacuum pumps, okay? So here's the deal. Most people don't understand that, let's say you have a manifold set. Let's say you have a field piece S-Man 4, let's make it easy like this. You have a field piece S-Man 360, okay? That is a 3-port manifold. You have 3 quarter-inch ports on that manifold, okay? So you put your quarter-inch hose on the high side, you put your quarter-inch hose on the low side, and you put your yellow process hose on the vacuum pump, okay? And you start to pull an evacuation. All right, here's what you don't realize. The hoses on your system are limited to like 1 CFM a hose, okay? Something like that. It's like 1 point something or other. It's minimal, okay? So let's say you have a 7 CFM JB vacuum pump, okay? But you have quarter-inch hoses on it. You will never pull 7 CFMs through those 2 quarter-inch hoses. It's not going to happen. So you're basically limiting yourself on your hoses. Now, you go to big giant hoses, get some true blue hoses, okay? Or some big Appion hoses, and you'll get the full flow of your vacuum pump, okay? And what you're going to find is that you don't need to put 2 vacuum pumps. Most of the systems that I work on, one single vacuum pump is going to do the job using large diameter hoses, so that way you can get full flow. Also taking out the Schrader cores, because the Schrader cores are a massive restriction. Okay, so I don't see, I mean, maybe someone can correct me, but I don't see why you couldn't use 2 vacuum pumps. But honestly, the money you spend on that extra vacuum pump, just put that money into just 1 true blue hose or 2, okay, and you're going to increase your vacuum time tenfold. It's going to be amazing how fast your evacuation can happen, okay? So using those 1/4-inch hoses, guys, the whole concept of a triple evacuation, right? Where in the past, you know, before we were using, before my time, but the first triple evac was vacuum the system down. You would purge the system. Oftentimes people would purge it with R12 or R22, then vent it into the atmosphere, pull a vacuum again, do it again, and do it again, okay? The whole thing of a triple evac, everything that I've read basically said that was because we were limited by the tools that we had. So that was the best way they could pull an evacuation. There's really not a need for a triple evac anymore. A triple evac is useless if you have proper vacuum hoses that are large inside diameter. The True Blue hoses, again, I have no affiliation with them. I just really like them. They're 3/4 of an inch inside diameter, okay? And you can hook that up to a 7 CFM pump and you'll get the full flow of the pump, okay? So really, yeah, to answer your question, I'm sure you could use 2 vacuum pumps, but there's no need for it. So long story short, all right. Let's see what else. What's the most expensive tool I've ever lost? Expensive tool I've ever lost. Digital multimeter. I had at the time, many years ago, it was a brand new field piece, top of the line digital multimeter, and I can tell you exactly where I left it. I can still picture it this day. It was a restaurant that I went to one time, and I left it there, and of all things, the restaurant shut down after that. So, yeah. That was probably the most expensive tool that I can think of right now that I lost. All right, let's see what else. There you go, 0.6 CFM of flow on a 1/4-inch hose. There you go. So Reefer Tech Mark came in clutch with the answer there, okay? So 0.6 CFM. So that awesome 7 CFM pump that you had to have, but you're using normal gauges, you're wasting your money. You might as well go buy the cordless Navac 2 CFM pump, and you're still not going to get the full flow of the 2 CFM pump using 1/4-inch hoses with Schraders and all that fancy stuff, okay? So if you're using a standard vacuum pump, get yourself some bigger hoses, whether it be the Appions or the True Blues, get the giant hoses. You're going to appreciate it. It's going to make your life so much easier. Can a CPR valve cause too much subcooling? I don't know about that, dude. Yeah, I don't know. That's an answer that's a little too... I don't know. I don't know if it would cause too much subcooling or not. All right, vacuum setup, need to refer to Jim Bergman. That's right. Jim Bergman is the man when it comes to evacuations, okay? Just look up AccuTools, look up Jim Bergman, look up HVAC school, look up evacuations. You'll see all the information on that stuff. Lots of great information. Jim is a really cool dude. I had the honor of meeting him at the last AHR Expo. Very nice guy. So how do I tell the difference between a bad TXV and a sensing bulb that's lost its charge? Well, it depends. So in my situation, I deal with refrigeration systems. So if you lose your charge on a sensing bulb on a normal refrigeration expansion valve, the valve is going to slam shut, and it's not going to allow any refrigerant to flow through the system. It's going to be like there's a complete blockage. So that's a pretty easy one. As long as you can hear your solenoid valve actuating, majority of the time your problem is going to be the power head on the expansion valve. If you're dealing with a Sporlan expansion valve, then you can typically take the power head off. Now, in that situation, though, sometimes you can be in a weird predicament where the power head failed, right, when the system the system pumped down after the power head failed, basically. So all the refrigerant is still stuck on the high side, and you can't safely pump the system down because the refrigerant's stuck and it won't flow. So in that situation, you'd have to recover the refrigerant, change the power head and or expansion valve, clean the strainer, whatever it is, and go from there, okay? But so on a refrigeration system, basically the expansion valve is just not going to let refrigerant through, okay? Twisted Candle Company, thank you so very much. That is an awesome super chat. That is much appreciated. Let's see. What's better in picture diagnosis is things big, middle, or small, or acorn. Well, it really depends on, is it a late night service call? Then it's going to be a little picture diagnosis, so that way we can come back and do a big picture diagnosis. Okay, so it really depends on the situation. When is the 1 inch inside diameter? How awesome would that be? Yeah, that's a pretty big hose. Let me see what else we got. Do I ever work with Atlas Copco compressors? I've never worked with an Atlas Copco, no. Let me see what I'm missing in here. Black hoses are for vacuum. Yeah, knock it off. I mean, traditionally, yes, colored hoses are for, but you know, you can get, they do make like yellow large diameter hoses, but that's a pretty good way to think about it. But they also make black 1/4 inch hoses too, so you got to be careful about that. But that's a pretty safe way to assume that if it's a vacuum hose, it's going to be black, and or in AccuTool's case, it's going to be a giant blue hose. Okay, but the point that he's trying to make is, for the most part, if you're dealing with typical 1/4 inch hoses, they're going to be the red, blue, and yellow. Okay, but you can get yellow and 3/8 and all that stuff too. So let me see what else we got going on here. I already answered that question. Are low NOx furnaces becoming common in commercial buildings? I don't know about commercial buildings, but they're like a law here in California, low NOx. In fact, we're going past low NOx, and I think we have another law that just came out on the residential side where we got to use these high efficiency systems or something. So Acorn picture diagnosis, that is a interesting name for sure. Okay, so let me get to my list of things to talk about. So the last video that I did was the hybrid freezer is too warm, and that one was a blown fuse. I can't stress that one enough. Okay, I told my story about the fuse blowing. I'll tell it again on this live stream, but in that situation, I had a blown fuse. I tested for any shorts to ground. I went downstairs, investigated everything. I did not just replace the fuse, okay? I ended up finding what I thought could have been the problem, which was a wire that had come off of a terminal, and it was potentially rubbing up against the heater terminal, the opposite phase, and potentially, it looked like it had a burn mark on it. So I corrected that, went upstairs, tested for all continuity to ground again, nothing toned out, checked everything else, spun the fan motors, and then I replaced the fuses and started the system up. Okay. Now, I told this story, horrible experience. I think I told this on the end of that video, but I'll tell it again. I was at a golf course many years ago. It was a late night service call. They called me about their kitchen AC not working. I can still picture the AC. It was a York, like 15-ton package unit, and it was the one, if you guys know what I'm talking about, it was the standard York Sunline unit that had the double condenser that turned in and had a little space in between the condensers on the inside. It was like a horrible design on that unit, right? Because you could hardly ever get in there to clean that condenser. And it had a blown fuse, okay? So I went up onto the roof, found a blown fuse. They had an extra fuse. I put a fuse in there, turned it on, heard a big boom, and then fuse was blown again. And I don't think I told this part. Then what I did was I turned it off, had another fuse, put another fuse in there, turned it on, heard a big boom again, but this time, all of a sudden, the entire building went quiet. That eerie quiet sound, and my stomach dropped. Uh-oh, what happened? I was trying to change a fuse without finding out that there was a direct short at the compressor, okay? So what happened was, I actually blew the main. The main breaker blew. And of all things, when the main breaker blew, the breaker went bad. Okay, what kind of luck is that? So the main breaker was a 480 volt system. The main breaker went bad. It could not be reset. The breaker itself was bad. They had to call out. It was middle of the night, so there was nothing I could do. They called out an electrician the next morning. The electrician could not get the circuit breaker until the weekday. So they basically, this golf course had an entire main panel down for the rest of the weekend. Now, I'm sure many people will say you should have been able to get it or whatever, but that was my fault because I did not test for direct shorts to ground before I replaced the fuse. I'm getting the Coke nose right now. I did not test direct shorts to ground before I replaced that fuse. That was the worst feeling in my stomach, knowing that I did something wrong. That was my fault that breaker blew. okay? Now, was it my fault that the breaker went bad? That was questionable. I don't know, okay? Nothing ended up ever happening with that job, but that was the worst situation. And what did I say in my video? I said, stop resetting breakers, stupid, okay? That's what I told myself. Don't just reset a breaker, okay? Don't do it. Don't just change a fuse. Look for direct shorts to ground first, okay? Spin motors, make sure they're not locked up. If you do find a problem, isolate it, then check for more shorts to ground, then put fuses in and restart it, okay? All right, let me see what I'm missing here. Coke nose, yep, all right. What am I missing? Okay, cool. Dave G says he blackened a whole mall because of a grounded 480 volt compressor. We live and we learn. That is true. I learned from that mistake. And it was like literally that point forward. I no longer started just changing fuses and moving on. I was like, I realized I screwed up. Okay. So we learn from our mistakes and we move on from them. Okay. And I try to share them with you guys. I try to share my mistakes all the time. I really, really appreciate all the people in here. If you guys could smash the like button, please. It really helps out the stream. Okay. For new condensers made for 404, 507, have I tried 448 or 449? Just keep 404. Okay, so 448A works with polyester oil. Okay, it will work in a 404 system. You may have some capacity difference there, though. So you just got to be cautious about the capacity difference, okay? So you need to do some research to find out if you're going to gain or lose capacity. But it'll work in the system. Yeah, no problem with that. You can do conversions from 404 to 448A. In a perfect world, you size the condensing unit correctly. You change the orifice in the distributor tube, and you change the expansion valve to an R22, temperature, whatever, medium or low temp valve, okay? But I have been told that there's some other things you can do without having to change all the valves. Sometimes you can make adjustments depending on whether or not the valve was oversized in the first place or whatever, so... but yeah, you don't have to necessarily. Do I recommend the Fieldpiece 480V? Yeah, I carry a Fieldpiece 480V. If mine broke today, I would buy another one, okay? Typically don't use the micron gauge in my 480V, but there is times, like I just did a job the other day where I used my manifold to vacuum a system down. It's not ideal. It's not perfect. But you know, I do every once in a while, but I can urge you as much as possible, don't pull vacuums through your manifold unless, you know, certain situations pop up, okay? Try to do an evacuation without a manifold using separate hoses, completely eliminate the manifold from the system. Let me see what I'm missing in here. Hey, my buddy Curious HVAC guy's in here. If I haven't already, do me a favor and go subscribe to the HVAC Overtime YouTube channel myself, Bill, Curious HVAC Guy, A-Team Adam, and HVACR North, Joe. We all do a show Friday evenings, 6:05, 6:10 p.m. on Friday evenings. We go live and we just kind of have a hangout and talk about different stuff. So I don't know if one of the moderators can go ahead and post the HVAC Overtime YouTube channel in the chat. Do me a favor and go subscribe to that channel and check out our show on Friday evenings, okay? Let me see what else we got in here. All right. I'm going to go ahead and go to my list. So I talked in the very beginning of the stream about I built a custom little gantry to do a lift with some Unistrut. Okay. I don't know if I'm going to release the full video on that for liability reasons, but I definitely shared some pictures on Instagram and I might show it a little clip or something like that in a video. It's not perfect. It definitely could use improvement, but it really, really helped me. I said that in the beginning of the stream. It was a 75-pound compressor. In the past, I probably would have just tried to lift that compressor by myself, but I was concerned about my back. And so I built a little gantry with a pulley system set up and was able to get that compressor onto the roof safely. So I talked about that one. I'm going through my list of things to talk about. So I had some great questions from a guy named Drew. Now, Drew, I'm not going to be able to get every one of these questions, but I'm going to kind of talk about this topic a little bit. So Drew is very interested in getting into HVACR, and he has some really great questions that he sent me this great email, okay? The first question is actually a really good one, okay? The first question he asked, because he wants to get into the trade, is he said, what is the difference between starting with an apprenticeship and starting with a technical school, okay? Now, it really depends, okay? Because some people call an apprenticeship just basically a green tech that's learning and he's riding along with something. And it kind of is in a way, okay? But typically an apprenticeship is where you work and go to school simultaneously, okay? So you literally will go to school a couple hours a week, and then also you'll work limited time a week too, okay? If you're in a union program, you go through an apprenticeship for so many years and you go to school so many nights a week. You have to meet a certain educational timeline amount, and you have to work so many hours out in the field before you can graduate from your apprenticeship. Essentially, the same thing kind of works with me. When I hire a new tech, he's considered an apprentice if he doesn't have experience, and he typically rides with me for 6 to 8 months, and then I slowly move him out into the field until I feel comfortable with his diagnosis and he learns a little bit at a time, okay? What's the difference with going to trade school? Here's where a lot of people get confused. I'm not saying that all trade schools are going to do this, but some trade schools mislead you. I don't care if you graduate top honors, all this fancy stuff from a trade school. That does not mean you have field experience. You still need to start at the bottom and work your way up, okay? Trade school gives you fundamentals and a little bit of a background, so that way when you go out into the field, you can get your eyes on things and you're a little bit more familiar with things. A trade school in no way can show you every single thing that's going to be out in the field. Under no circumstances should anybody expect to come out of a trade school and be making journeyman wages. That'd be nuts if that happens. I'm not saying it never did, but I'm just saying that's nuts, okay? So an apprenticeship, in my eyes, even after you finish trade school, in some ways or another, you're still going to go through an apprenticeship, okay? Now, you got to be cautious because some of these residential companies out there will start up service technicians, especially the sales companies, the companies that are really based on sales, is they'll hire kids out of school, they'll throw them out in a van and get them out there, and if they can learn how to sell things, then they move on. But a lot of times, I'm not saying every one of these companies, but a lot of times, most of the people at these companies don't know how to repair things. They only know how to sell things, okay? I would be very cautious, and I'm not judging people, but I would be very cautious about going to work for a company that's going to throw you in a van and expect you to go run service calls on your own when you're fresh out of trade school, okay? That's a recipe for disaster, and they're setting you up for failure. They're also making a horrible business decision because there's so many mistakes that you can make as a technician fresh out of school when you don't have experience, okay? In a perfect world, you finish a full trade school, or you go to trade school while you're working. You do a proper apprenticeship. You ride with someone. You learn with someone for 6 months to a year, if not longer, okay? And then eventually you slowly work your way out into the field. You do not just get thrown out to the wolves. Now, I realize there's some people out there that have done this and they've succeeded and it's all worked out well, but there's a lot of people that get burnt out and quit the industry. I've seen so many different people tell me this through emails and different things. Man, I wish I wouldn't have quit. It was just so hard, you know? Don't let a company just throw you in a van, okay? Because you're doing yourself an injustice. You're not going to help them. It's just going to be a headache, okay? I don't care if you're the most mechanically inclined person. There's a lot of things you have to learn, okay? So a typical apprenticeship, you're going to go to school while you're working, okay? In general, he asks a lot of questions. Kyle, thank you so very much for that super chat. Any thoughts on Greenhex RV or RVE you work there? Kyle, I do not have experience. A lot of experience with Greenhex. I do not know what the RV or the RVE, so enlighten me on those. But I typically just work on Greenhex exhaust fans, just like the cube fans in the restaurants that I deal with. So I don't have any experience with that, with what you're asking me, but I'm always interested in learning more. So if you want to send me information about what you're talking about, Kyle, I'd be glad to talk to you about it, okay? hvacrvideos@gmail.com. But yeah, I'm always willing to learn more information, but I don't know what the RV or the RVE is, okay? Let me see what else we got in here. Good Riddance says some good things. He said, pay attention in school. Don't be a knucklehead and immediately put that knowledge to use. And I'm going to add to that. Once you're a service tech and you get out in the field, okay, your job is going to be difficult, okay? So you're probably going to be a gopher, okay? You're going to be a guy that's going to go up and you're going to be working with someone and you're going to be the go-to guy. You know, when he needs you to go get the vacuum pump, you're going to go get the vacuum pump, okay? Don't think that you're just some horrible person that doesn't get to learn anything. You're learning, okay? Trust me, you're learning. Because how many times did you go up and down on the roof today? You went down and you got the vacuum pump, okay? Then you brought it up to him. And then he said, Well, you didn't bring me the manifold. So you went back down and you got the manifold or the vacuum hoses, and then you came back up and he said, where's my micron gauge? Oh, darn it. You had to go back down again. And then you got the torches, and then you got the dryer, and you got all this stuff. And then the next time you did the same thing on the next job. And it's like, hey, wait a minute. Where did you learn? The first time you had to go up and down 10 times. The second time, hey, you know what? He needs the vacuum pump. I better go get the micron gauge. I better get the vacuum hoses. I better get the scale. Maybe I should bring the refrigerant up too. Okay. So you learn from that stuff. You should be learning from that stuff. Okay. Every time you should be trying to think, how's this job going to go easier? What can I do to make this better? Okay. Another thing, as an apprentice or a new tech, when you're on a roof, okay, even if you're not working on a piece of equipment, if you have a single moment of free time, walk over to something, you don't know what it is, take a picture of it, take a picture of the model and serial number. Don't waste any time on it right now, but when you go home, when you're off work, go research that piece of equipment, figure out what it is. So that way, the next time you come up on the roof and you're working with your senior tech and you say, hey, you know what, I was doing some research on that, fresh air hood right there. And that's really interesting. I think it's really cool. You'll impress your senior tech or whatever, and you'll also show them that you have drive and initiative and you want to learn. Okay. All right. Let me see what else we got in here. Flash Focus, thank you so very much for that super chat. What is my opinion on buying a Maristar brand heat pump over more expensive brands? Okay, so I don't do residential air conditioning, but I can tell you this, okay? There's a lot of problems with several different types of equipment. I'm going to name brands, okay? Goodman gets a black eye because it's the worst piece of equipment out there is what people say. But it's not necessarily the worst, okay? Goodman has value brands. They have expensive brands. A Maristar may be called a value brand, okay? But if it's installed properly, a piece of equipment should be expected to work pretty well for the most part, okay? A lot of people install equipment incorrectly, and it gives that particular piece of equipment a black eye, okay? So would I install an Maristar unit at my house? Probably. I mean, I'm not very familiar with them, but I'm sure I would, okay? Would I install a Goodman unit at my house? I mean, I guess. It just depends on, what if it fits what I want, okay? So as long as it's installed properly, don't skimp on the installation, okay? Now, does the Maristar unit give you the energy efficiency performance that you want? Does the package itself look good? Is it going to be an eyesore where it's located? Are those units known to be loud? Do some research. What's the dB rating on the condenser fan motor and blade? Okay, is it a really quiet unit or is it a really loud unit? Okay, you can do that research yourself. That information's usually on the internet. You can go for it. So, do I have anything bad to say about a Maristar? No, I personally don't. Okay, do every brand out there? Does every brand have some sort of a problem? Yes. Every brand has their quirks and their little things that they do. Okay. So just do your research. And what I would strongly suggest is that you find a contractor that you feel comfortable with, okay, and ask them what they're comfortable installing, okay? Here's something that I tell people all the time. I do commercial refrigeration, okay? I work on ice machines all day long. If you ask me to go work on an Isomatic ice machine or a Scotsman ice machine, I instantly am like, ugh, I hate those machines, okay? But I can talk to other service technicians and they say they love those machines. Why do I hate Scotsman and Isomatic? It's not that I hate, it's that I'm not very familiar with them. I don't know their quirks. I don't know the problems and I don't work on them very much. So I'm not as comfortable with them, okay? So I prefer to work on a Hoshizaki or a Manitowoc because those are the two machines I work on every single day and I'm comfortable with them. Now, if I put a Hoshizaki ice machine in front of someone who's never worked on one, they're going to be lost and they're going to hate that machine. But I'm not because I'm comfortable, okay? So whatever your contractor, find a contractor that you like, that you're comfortable with, and whatever your contractor likes, I'd consider installing or having that equipment installed, okay? So hopefully I answered your question. Let me see what else we got in this chat right now. What am I missing? Doesn't look like I'm missing a whole lot in here right now. What tools do I recommend? I mean, it really depends. What kind of tools are you wanting? Let me see what else we're in here. Oh my goodness. Steven Montanez. Hopefully I didn't pronounce your name wrong. I appreciate that super chat. Thank you so very much. You're a residential tech, but you love watching my videos. You're in Orange County. Maybe you can ride along with me for a day. Well, I can't do ride-alongs because the lovely state of California and all the fancy insurance that we have makes it a nightmare. But send me an email. Maybe we can meet up sometime or something like that and talk or whatever. So hvacrvideos@gmail.com. Let me see. You bet I prefer Hoshizaki. Well, let's say this. The first part of my career, every restaurant that I worked in had a Hoshizaki ice machine. So I'm very comfortable with Hoshizaki ice machines. But for the last 10 years of my career, it's been Manitowoc ice machines. So I'm kind of 50-50. Both of them have their quirks. As far as installations goes, I'm pretty comfortable installing the Manitowoc ice machines, and they are not as heavy as a Hoshizaki ice machine. So I kind of prefer the Manitowocs when it comes to installing them. As far as servicing them and cleaning them, kind of both ways. Both have their quirks, but I guess probably if I had to say one or the other, Hoshizaki is probably my favorite, but it's a pretty almost even tie between the Manitowoc and the Hoshizakis. So let me see what else we got in here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get to my list. So I answered that. So someone had posted something on my channel, and this is an interesting one, so I'm going to point this out. So they said, hey, you know what? They said they hope that I'm not working too hard, and they hope that I'm not going to make myself sick because I've been working a lot lately, okay? So something that comes of the position that I have, I run a refrigeration and air conditioning company. We're short on technicians right now. I haven't really made the official announcement, but I know everybody already knows that I'm really looking for a service technician right now, okay? I'm considering an apprentice. I really would love an experienced tech, but I don't know. I have issues with some experienced techs because maybe they don't do things quite the way that I want, or they tend to have bad habits or whatever. So I'm really, really leaning towards training an apprentice right now. If you guys are interested, send me an email, hvacrvideos@gmail.com, but you have to be local. You have to live in the Riverside, San Bernardino, Fontana, just the greater Inland Empire area. Okay, I can't have someone living far away from me. It's just not going to be feasibly possible. So I literally live in the city of Riverside. You got to live rather close to me. Okay, but I am interested in hiring apprentices and/or experienced service technicians that work with restaurants. Okay, so the person had asked me about getting burnt out. One of the things that happens is because I'm a business owner. Okay, I have to be the person to get things done. Everybody relies on me, and when I say that, I'm short a couple service techs right now, okay? So we have work, and I can choose to give up that work. I can let a customer go. I can do that. But in these crazy times right now, it's kind of gut-wrenching to try to let a customer go because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You don't know if this particular restaurant chain's not going to be here tomorrow. And what happens if I let the wrong one go and then that one closes too, and then I hosed myself, okay? So I kind of am up a creek right now without a paddle, and I'm just doing everything that I can to keep the doors open and keep everybody working, and especially as we come into the winter, because California, we don't do crazy busy winters out here, okay? So we don't have a real demand for heating, so the refrigeration keeps us going. So it's kind of a necessary evil having to do these service calls and be on call all the time, unfortunately, in this trade. And it's a bummer, but at the same time, it feeds the family. So let's see what I'm missing in here. I won't trace someone and pay relocation fees. That's a hard one, man. All right. Have I accidentally set off the fire alarms while a restaurant was open? Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's not a fun thing. I've set off, but it's usually not my fault. And when I say that, restaurants tend to, the fire alarm companies tend to install differently depending on the different cities. Okay, different cities and municipalities have different codes and different ways they want things done, such as some areas want you to have 2 duct detectors, one in the supply and one in the return, or some want you to have one in the return or one in the supply. It just, sometimes they're silly. So sometimes smoke detectors are wired in a way that when you power down the unit, you set off a trouble signal and signals the fire department. I've had smoke detectors before that were wired incorrectly that I found the hard way when I went and powered down the unit. It literally set off the annunciators and the entire fire alarm. Like, that was completely incorrect, okay? So I have done it. One time I was working, I can say this because they don't exist anymore, but one time I was working at a GameWorks. It used to be a giant arcade that was in a shopping mall, in Ontario Mills shopping mall of all things. And they were complaining about I think they were complaining about a duct detector that was beeping or flashing or something like that. So I climbed up on a giant ladder up to the duct, and there was a duct detector right there, and I was going to pull the cover off to figure out what was going on. And I pulled the cover off, and then all of a sudden, I start hearing sirens, and I hear these giant turbines start turning up. They had exhaust fans on that whole wing of the shopping mall. All of a sudden, all the air conditioning units on that whole wing of the shopping mall, the entire shopping mall, shut down, and these giant extraction fans turned on and basically made a giant negative air pressure in the building and started sucking all the air out of the building. And that was very scary because I was like, what did I do? All I did was take a cover off of a smoke detector and it set off all that crap. It was a nightmare, okay? But I didn't understand about trouble circuits and how sometimes in shopping malls they do really weird things with trouble circuits. So there was a tamper switch, and the way they had it wired was they set off the actual fire alarm. Now, luckily in that situation, the mall received the fire alarm signal before they dispatched fire department. But I've had fire department show up on a building too before, accidentally. So yes, I've done it one too many times. So let me see what else. Thoughts on, I don't know about that. I'm not going to answer any political stuff. Yeah. Let me see what else we got going in here. I see you there, Ernesto. Yeah, I see. Do I have a workshop or a warehouse? Yeah, we have a shop that we work off of. It's not a warehouse or anything like that. So have I already answered that question? Okay, I'm going to go down here to bottom. Have I ever worked on multi-system rack with a CPC? No, I have not worked. Well, the CPC controllers, no, I have not worked with systems with that. I've worked on, I've never done work on parallel rack systems. I mean, I had one small, tiny parallel rack system, but it controlled like 7 reach-ins, 3 walk-ins. It was just off of one condensed unit, hot gas defrost and all that, or hot gas bypass and all that. But no, I've never worked on like a normal, huge supermarket rack system with a CPC or anything like that. No, I have not. How to charge a capillary tube system. You weigh in the factory charge. You make your repair, whatever it is, repair. You change the filter dryer. You evacuate the system below 500 microns, and then you find out what the factory recommended charge is, and you weigh that in, and you charge that way. Capillary tubes, you can't really check charge via superheat or subcooling because manufacturers really beat to the tune of their own drum. So you always need to lean on the manufacturers who design that particular piece of equipment. Be very careful too, because majority of the time on capillary tube systems, especially if they're 134A, they more than likely have had restricted cap tubes or plugged up cap tubes, and people try to compensate by adding extra gas and different things like that. So be very cautious about capillary tube systems. That's why it's so important to weigh in the charge and look into that. Now, as far as why I said you can't use superheat and or subcooling, you got to be careful, because on cap tube systems, have you ever seen how they take a capillary tube and going to the evaporator, they wrap it around the suction line? Okay, well, what they're doing there, Dimitri, thank you so very much for that super chat, bud. That is awesome. Thank you. So what they do with that capillary tube is they wrap it around the suction line to gain efficiency on the system. They're essentially subcooling the refrigerant before it goes to the point of the evaporator where it meters the refrigerant, okay? So by wrapping it around the suction line, that suction line is now absorbing the heat before, as it's going back to the compressor, that the capillary tube has in it. And it's changing the way the system operates, okay? So the same thing goes for if it has a hot gas condensate heater, okay? So oftentimes they'll come with a discharge line coming out of the compressor, go into a drain pan, so that way when the drain line from the evaporator comes out, it goes into the hot gas condensate heater. Well, if you have water in that hot gas condensate heater, the system's going to perform differently than if you didn't have water in it, okay? So it's very difficult to use superheat and or subcooling to diagnose capillary tube systems. Now, there's some things you can do. I mean, if you put your gauges and you put your temperature clamp on the liquid line and you have 30 degrees subcooling, okay, yes, a gross subcooling like that could tell you something. You're overcharged more than likely. Something's going on there, okay? But it's very difficult. So your best bet is to weigh in the charge and use the manufacturer's recommended amount of refrigerant and ask them what they recommend the refrigerant pressure should be also, okay? Now that I answered that and went off on a tangent. Let me see what else. Can you use a low temp box for medium temp? What are the cons? Yeah, you can, but there's some problems. Long term, you're probably not going to have very good compressor life. Low temperature is meant to have a cold suction gas going back to the compressor to help cool the compressor off. And at medium temp, that suction gas temperature is a lot higher. So theoretically, you could have an overheat issue within that compressor, okay? You're going to be grossly oversized, okay? Because low temp typically has bigger condensing units, okay? Higher BTU capacity. So therefore, you put it on a medium temp and you're probably going to have some short cycling. It's probably going to cycle a little too fast depending on what it's on. You might have humidity issues or different things like that in the box too. So you got to be careful about that. Peter, thank you so very much for that super chat, bud. That is awesome. That is much appreciated, man. Could I explain liquid injection for freezers and are they only on scroll compressors? Chris. Okay, not the smartest person when it comes to liquid injection, but I have a general idea of how it works. Let me pull this valve. I happen to have one right here. This is a DTC valve, okay? This is a discharge temperature controlled expansion valve. That's all this is an expansion valve, okay? So typically you'll see this on low temp compressors, and when low temp compressors are operating at proper operating temperatures and pressures, a lot of times they'll have a high pressure differential or high compression ratio, okay? And these valves essentially help to cool off the compressor in that situation, okay? Now, this one is a DTC valve. There is, capillary tube style injection too, but essentially all this is an expansion valve, guys. It's just an expansion valve, okay? So you notice this one's actually made by Sporlan, but it's a Copeland valve, but it has the standard strainer that a Sporlan expansion valve has, okay? This one opens and closes via the temp well in the top of the compressor head, okay? We tend to have overheat issues and high compression ratios on scroll compressors, okay? So when you have especially the R22 type refrigerants, 448A, 449A, you're gonna run into high discharge line temps, okay? And you can have breakdown of the oil and different things like that in the compressor. So that's where the temperature responsive expansion valve, DTC valve, liquid injection, whatever you want to call it, is going to help to cool off that compressor so it's not overheating as bad. That's a real quick, without thinking about it too hard, explanation. So hopefully that helps for you a little bit. The best is when the fire department shows up before I realize I tripped the alarm. Yeah, in my situation, fire dude popped over. It was a silent alarm, and they had it wired incorrectly. It was another situation on a mall. And yeah, dude pops over the roof right there. And I was like, I was like kind of confused. And are receivers needed with a headmaster? Yes, Chris. You have to have a receiver with a headmaster, okay? Let me preface that I'm sure there's an engineer out there that's oversized a condenser in a way that he didn't put a receiver on a system. But for the most part, yes, head pressure control valves need to have a receiver, okay? We are coming into that season right now where we're going to be dealing with a lot of head pressure control valves. We need to understand that if we're using a head pressure control valve, we need to properly charge the system. If you are dealing with a copper tube and aluminum fin or copper tube and fin condenser, just a standard condenser, okay? The best way to charge a head pressure control valve system, okay, or a flooded charge, is to use the Sporlan 90-30-1 method, okay? There's a service bulletin. All you got to look up is Sporlan 90-30-1. And what it does is it helps you to calculate the internal volume of that condenser, so that way you know how much refrigerant to add to properly flood that condenser so the head pressure control valve can work, okay? So a head pressure control valve, what does it do? Head pressure control valve essentially maintains a pressure differential across your expansion valve. Let's think about it like this. Let me grab a couple valves from back here. Got a couple different valves here. We got a standard expansion valve right here. Okay, nothing fancy. I have a cutaway of an expansion valve right here. I've showed this a lot. Okay, simple cutaway that I did myself just using a bandsaw. You can see how the valve works. Okay, I'm going to give you the easiest explanation here. If you don't have enough refrigerant pushing the refrigerant through the valve at the proper rate, then therefore this valve can't maintain a proper superheat. Okay? Now, there's a lot more to it, but that's the easiest explanation. If the refrigerant is not flowing through at a proper rate, then this sensing bulb cannot adjust this valve and maintain proper superheat properly. Okay? We have to have a set pressure differential, especially on older expansion valves, like this one right here. This is an older style expansion valve. Very important to have a proper pressure differential across this valve. Okay, the way that we maintain that pressure differential is by maintaining a certain head pressure. A couple different ways we can maintain head pressure. One of the more common ways is to use a head pressure control valve, an LAC valve, okay? There's OROA valves, there's holdback valves, there's a couple different styles. The LAC valve, in my opinion, is the easiest way for me to explain it, okay? Essentially, on this valve, you have one line that's going to a T that goes to your discharge line. You have one line that goes to your receiver, and you have one line that comes out of your condenser, okay? If this valve goes into bypass, then the line coming out of the discharge of the compressor goes directly into the receiver, and it doesn't really allow refrigerant to come out of the condenser. What it does is it starts, not very much, it kind of fluctuates. What it does is it starts backing up refrigerant in the condenser like you're blocking it off with a piece of cardboard, drives the head pressure up in the system. It's called a flooded condenser, okay? This valve does that. Now, when that happens, okay, all of a sudden you're storing all this extra refrigerant in the condenser. You have to have extra refrigerant for that to happen, okay? And you still have to be sending 100% liquid, 100% liquid, a solid column of liquid to this expansion valve. This expansion valve won't work if it's being fed vapor, okay? So in order to maintain that liquid seal, or that 100% amount of liquid refrigerant going to that expansion valve, we have to have a certain amount of extra refrigerant sitting in that receiver at all times, okay? Hold on. I thought I had a receiver right here. I got a receiver right here. And you notice that this receiver, the outlet of the receiver, actually, the outlet of the receiver is on the top. And you notice that there's a dip tube coming all the way down to the bottom, okay? So that dip tube is the level at where the liquid needs to be at all times for this receiver to pull liquid out. So if we start backing up all that extra refrigerant in the condenser, then all of a sudden the liquid refrigerant level in this receiver drops below this dip tube, then the dip tube is going to pull vapor off the top of the receiver, and it's going to feed vapor refrigerant to your expansion valve, and your expansion valve is not going to work correctly, okay? So in order for the head pressure control valve to maintain proper pressure differential, so that way we have a certain set amount of refrigerant always going to your expansion valve, so that way your expansion valve can maintain proper superheat, so that way your compressor or your evaporator can perform properly, okay, and absorb the heat and take that heat and discharge it out the condenser, so the whole system acts as a whole. And if one of those things stops working properly, then everything falls off the map, okay? Again, I know I went off on a crazy tangent there, but hopefully some of that made sense for you guys. All right. Do I always recycle reclaimed refrigerants? Do I reuse reclaimed refrigerants? You're allowed. There's some weird rules about that, but yeah, I'll reuse refrigerant if it's on the same system at the same customer for sure. As long as there's no potential for damage to that refrigerant, yeah, I'll reuse it to try to save them money. Let me see what else I missed in here. Can a defrost clock on a slush machine stop allowing the slush to defrost, or is it just set wrong? Lily Rose, I have no idea. I'm sorry. I'm not a beverage technician that deals with slush machines. So is replacing 134 with R290, R600 a blend a good idea? No. Never, ever use R290, R600, or any other hydrocarbon refrigerant in a system that was not properly designed for it. The compressors in hydrocarbon systems are spark proof. The starting components are spark proof. The condenser fan motors are spark proof. If you install a hydrocarbon refrigerant, that is R290 is 100% unodorized propane, you could have some situations. So do not convert a system to R290. That is completely dangerous. You do not want to hurt yourself. I do not ever recommend converting to a hydrocarbon system from a non-hydrocarbon system. No way. What's the common problem with the undersized evaporator walk-in cooler? Performance. If you have an undersized evaporator, then the condensing unit's going to have long run times. You can have compressor overheat issues. It's going to take a very long time for it to bring the box temperature down. Yeah, and it's just never going to satisfy. You're going to have high box temperatures all the time. I need some more tea. It's killing me right now. Let's see what else. All right, I'm going to get to my list because I know there's some other things I told people I would talk about. Oh, great question I had. Do I ever take people with me when I do nighttime jobs? Okay, first off, I don't really do nighttime jobs very much anymore. I used to do a lot of nighttime jobs, but yeah, we've kind of pushed away from that and haven't been doing it very much. But there's been some situations where I've had to do compressor replacements overnight and stuff like that. This is kind of a gray area. So the technical, I prefer to have another service technician with me or with one of my service techs, okay, if they're doing nighttime work. But I will do nighttime work myself without another tech all the time. I'm more concerned about my techs than I am about myself. So I typically will try to have two of my service techs together if they're doing nighttime work. But if it's me by myself, yeah, I'll usually go out there and do it by myself. So, all right, let me see what else we got. I already answered that one. So temperature controllers, I wanted to address this. So when I go out on walk-in cooler calls, and I've said this many times, when I go out on walk-in cooler calls, walk-in freezer calls, the last thing I want to do is get in there and start turning on the temperature controller, okay? If I do, I take very close note as to where the temperature controller was at. In fact, I might even mark it, okay? Because there's nothing worse than going in there, turning on the temperature controller, finding out it wasn't the problem, not setting it back where it should have been, then leaving. Okay, just because it says 40 on that mechanical temperature controller doesn't mean it's going to maintain 40. Okay, mechanical temperature controllers hardly ever get set for where it says the temperature is at. They're usually way off. Okay, so I urge people not to adjust on mechanical temperature controllers, and if you do, mark them, because there's nothing worse than making your repair, not waiting until the box comes down to temp and assuming just because you set it at 40 and then getting a call back the next day it's still not cold enough. Well, it's because you didn't wait for the thing to come down to temp, which I'm not mad at because I oftentimes won't wait either. But had you not touched that damn control, more than likely, you wouldn't have to worry about the control, okay? So, or if you would have marked it and set it exactly back where it was set at, okay? Mechanical controls in general, they have a lot of drift to them. If you mount them on evaporator coils, you'll notice a lot of vibration issues. Like I get, it's pretty common, you'll get walk-in freezer service calls where they call you out on an emergency on a Sunday. My walk-in freezer's not working, my ice cream's all soft, and you go out there and the mechanical temperature controller is set for 0 degrees. And you're like, well, one of the cooks got in here and adjusted it. No. If it's mounted on the coil, majority of the time, the vibration adjusts it up to 0 degrees. Okay, that I've learned that over the years. Mechanical controls are never accurate. So we turn it back down to -10 and it comes down to temp. Okay, but they're never accurate. So be very cautious. I try to change to digital controls whenever possible, but even digital controls have a flaw in that the thermistors or the sensors fail all the time. So it's kind of crazy. Romero, thank you so very much for that super chat, bud. That is awesome. Is it true that you can charge a walk-in by looking at the side glass once it's full is good? Yes and no, okay? So a sight glass is a window into the system at that exact point in the system, okay? So if you're working on a walk-in cooler, you fix a refrigerant leak, you're going to charge it up, and it has a sight glass, yes, you do want to have a clear sight glass, but that does not mean that it is 100% good yet, okay? You need to watch that system operate. It's also best to be sure not to clear that sight glass when the system's under a heavy load. You typically want to kind of slowly add refrigerant, let it come down in temperature, and then make sure it's clear once it gets down to set point or close to set point. Because what can happen is if you clear it when it's under a heavy load, you can actually overcharge the system a little bit. Now, if your receiver's big enough, it's not going to be a big deal, okay? But in some situations where systems aren't designed properly, that can be a problem, okay? In a perfect world, you charge a system, you clear the sight glass, it comes down to temp, it satisfies, you wait about 20 minutes, you check the evaporator superheat, you adjust if necessary, you give it a little bit more time, you make sure that you're maintaining superheat and call it a day, okay? I see these super chats and super stickers. Thank you so very much. Lily, thank you for that super sticker. And Peter, thank you so very much. And then Moo, you said, can I give a quick rundown on the refrigerant types of refrigerant? Is there one type that is better than the other? Great question. Okay, so here's the deal. I'm going to go back up so I'm not missing stuff. Let me make sure I'm not missing other things that came in. It doesn't look like it. Make sure you guys put your questions in caps lock, okay? So which refrigerant's better than the other? What's the downside? What's the plus side? Well, right over here, you guys can't really see it, but I have a giant pressure temperature chart on my wall, okay? There's several different flavors or types of refrigerants, okay? Several different colors. But guess what? What common thing do all refrigerants have? They all have a pressure-temperature relationship. A refrigerant is going to be a certain pressure at a certain temperature. A refrigerant is going to be a certain temperature at a certain pressure, period. Okay? So which refrigerant is better? Which refrigerant runs higher head pressure? What is the head pressure of this refrigerant? What does this one do? What is better about this? What is better about that? There's so many different flavors. I'm not really concerned about the different types of refrigerants so long as I understand the pressure-temperature relationship between the refrigerants, okay? I don't know off the top of my head what R22 pressures are at 100 degree ambient and, 75 degree on an air conditioner return air temp. I don't know what 410A is at 100 degree ambient or 75 degree return temp, but I do know that, hey, I want to maintain, depending on the efficiency of system, I don't know, 20 degrees over condensing temp, over ambient. So whatever the ambient temperature is, I want my condensing temp to be about 20 degrees over the ambient temp on a microchannel condenser. On an old R22, I want it to be about 30 degrees over ambient, okay? I want my my evaporator temperature to be about 45 degrees on an air conditioner at about 50% relative humidity, okay? So if I can understand the pressure-temperature relationship, I'm not so concerned about what's better about a refrigerant or another, okay? Now, a lot of times people blame problems with refrigerants on like the oil issues. Like a lot of people think that R134A plugs up capillary tubes on reach-ins. It's not necessarily the truth, okay? The polyester oil in the system plugs up the capillary tubes because majority of the time the customer's not maintaining the equipment and keeping the condensers clean. Therefore, they're running higher condensing temps, causing the oil to get burnt in the system, causing it to create buildup and plug up the capillary tubes. But unfortunately, R134A has been blamed for that, when really it's the oil, the polyester oil that absorbs moisture, really easily, the way that it interacts with the 134A and the customer's not maintaining the equipment. So I really don't have a preference over a refrigerant per se. I like to stick with the OEM refrigerants that came with the system as much as possible just to make things easier so I'm not having to think so hard. If I have an R22 package unit, I'd like to keep it R22 because it's really easy to say, hey, this unit takes 12 pounds of gas, period, because that's what the nameplate says, okay? But if I go with a blend or a replacement, then yeah, I got to start calculating a few different things and it's a little more difficult. So I like my job to be as easy as possible. So hopefully I didn't avoid your question too much. If I didn't cover it, send me an email, hvacrvideos@gmail.com. Let me see what else I'm missing in here. R410A operates at higher pressures than R22. Yes, but it's not a safety issue. I mean, the burst pressure of the copper is well above, the refrigerant. So I'm not concerned about 410A and R22 pressures and stuff like that. Now, don't ever try to put 410A in an R22 system, but I wouldn't be worried about the safety of it. You don't got to worry about that as long as you're following proper refrigeration practices. So, DHard01, you want to know why you get the assumption I'm a micromanager. You would hate being one of my techs and having to call me after each call. Well, I don't know if I'm a micromanager, but I definitely am concerned about the way that my company runs. So my techs, yes, they do check out with me after each call. And I'm gonna give you the rundown of a question. So one of my techs calls me and he says, "Hey, I'm all done over here. I fixed the air conditioner." And I say, "Okay, what did you do?" And he says, "Well, it had a high pressure code. I reset it. All the condenser fan motors are running and I can't find anything wrong." And I say, "Okay, so what did you look for? What was your troubleshooting process?" "Well, I just reset it and it's running." "Did you put your service gauges on it?" "No, but I mean, it doesn't have high pressure codes again." So in that situation, am I a micromanager for asking him and questioning him? "Did you put your service gauges on it? Did you check the subcooling? Did you go through this stuff?" Now, if I have a tech, and I have techs right now that I can send out to do something and I don't have to question them and they do it and it's fine, then I don't need a rundown of every job. I may ask them, "Hey, what did you do?" so I know what's going on, but I'm not necessarily going to micromanage someone unless they require micromanagement, okay? Now, if their skill level isn't quite where it needs to be and, you know, they need to be reminded, hey, you need to put your service gauges on that particular system, then sure, I guess you can call me a micromanager because I'm concerned about the company. Now, another thing that you have to understand, being that I'm a small business, my customers literally call my cell phone and say, hey, what happened at my restaurant? And I have to say, I don't know. Let me call my tech. They want an answer immediately when they call me. So I have to know what's going on because I'm the point of contact for those customers. Okay. So I do need to know. Plus, it's my company. I mean, bottom line, it needs to operate the way that I want it to operate. So I don't necessarily want to micromanage. I hate that because it makes my job harder when I have to micromanage something. And I have micromanaged people in the past because they required it. And I have had techs many times that didn't need micromanagement. So everybody's different. Okay. It's kind of hard. I hate the term micromanagement. I hate having to do it, but sometimes you have to. Okay. It's just one of those things. What was the most deteriorated walk-in coil I have ever worked on? I mean, I've seen them where there's really literally just copper lines running across them, you know, and they're just completely disintegrate. When you try to pull them off the wall, the coils are literally falling apart. The drain pans are rotted out. I've seen it many times. All right, let's see what else we got in here. Robert Clark says, caring about how well the customer is handled is not synonymous with being a micromanager. If the average SoCal tech is a flake, you need that attention to detail to keep the customers happy. And I'm not saying my techs are flake. I'm just saying in the past, I've had some techs that required more management than other techs. You know, some techs need you to kind of guide them along, especially if they're more of a junior tech and they don't know, like, they don't quite have the experience. Then yeah, I guess you can call that micromanager, but I just call it encouragement. Like, I'm just, hey, we got to follow these steps. This is the things you want to do. Give me your troubleshooting process, and we live and we learn. You know, maybe I can learn something from him. Maybe he can learn something from me. So, all right, let's see what else. Do I write my notes on an iPad app that syncs back to me? How do I do my paperwork? We have an invoicing system that everybody puts their information in. You know, I have a notes app in my phone that I personally use that I keep notes on for each restaurant and different things like that. So I can go back and look and say, hey, you know what? And I can attach pictures and different things like that. I've recently been investigating the notes and business management app called Slack. It's an app that's been around for a long time. It's very similar to Discord, but it's not for social media per se. It's more about an office management kind of a thing. So you can have different Slack channels. You know, I can have a channel with each one of my techs that I can see everything that they write. So therefore, they don't have to text me or email me every time. Now, I have not implemented this, but I have been kind of researching the Slack app. It's very promising, and it's a really cool, like, employee management, company management app. It has a lot of potential. So that's something I'm looking into at this moment. Yeah, Dave G, the beanies, the first run of beanies, I'm going to show you guys right now. The first run of beanies ended up being a failure. So I got samples and I didn't like them. First off, this is not, no, I don't like it because look at it stretches. So negative, this was a negative. So I said no to that one. And then this was another one that I had made and it looks like Mario Brothers, and the same thing, when you put it on your head, it like stretches. So that's a negative. So that was my first samples. This is another sample that I had, and the fit and the quality, like there's stitching coming out the back, like no, this was a negative. This one just said HVACR. So no, these beanies are a no-go. I'm currently having them make me some other samples of coming from a different company with some other different designs. So I'm just waiting. I'm also working on him about getting hoodies made too with designs. I'm thinking about putting the snowflake logo and then it's saying HVACR on the back. But I'm currently working on that. But it's just this whole process of it takes a while for them to produce a sample, to send it to me, for me to approve it or deny it. So imagine if I would have placed an order for like $3,000 worth of those beanies and I got them looking like that, I would have been pissed. So that's why I got to go through this sample process. Let me see what else. What is my biggest professional mistake? You forgot to email it. Oh, you forgot to email me it the last time. What is my biggest professional mistake? Professional mistake. As far as like invoicing things, I've accidentally not charged. Like I've gone to customers and quoted systems and done the install and then realized I didn't quote them correctly and we lost a lot of money on the job. I've quoted systems without marking them up. I've done things like that, you know, and then it's like it's with a customer that it's going to be really hard to get them to understand that I made a mistake. So we just have to suck it up and, you know, lose money on that one. I've taken on jobs before. I've talked about this one a lot, about the casino that I took on a job at, and then I ended up walking away from the job when we were like $5,000 in labor involved in it, and I just let it go. You know, because I should have never taken that job. There was too many red flags. But more or less, it's things that I've forgotten to charge for, would be the worst mistakes I've made. I mean, of course, no, I don't think I've ever ruined a compressor. No. Oh, I'll tell you. Actually, I remember it right now. I think I mentioned it recently. Was when I was very young in the trade, I was replacing a door on a walk-in cooler, and I left the disconnect off, and they called me the next day at like 24 hours later when they just realized that the disconnect was off. And I had to go there and help them throw all the food from that entire walk-in into the trash. And then I ended up splitting the cost with the food with them, because I went to them. They were like, you need to pay for this. And I said, you guys should have noticed it was off. You know, it was kind of like a catch-20, you know, like both of us were at fault there. I left it off, but they should have noticed it before 24 hours went by too. So yeah, we ended up splitting the cost on that one. That one cost us like $7,000. Because they had like $15,000 worth of food in that walk-in. So, all right, what else we got inside here? What am I missing? If I missed anything, guys, throw it in the chat in caps lock again, and I'll try to get to it. If someone on Discord is wondering if a blend of R290 and 600 will work on a small, no. Don't try to be an engineer and make your own refrigerant blends. Don't ever. I would not even answer that question. I would not recommend that to anybody. Do not ever blend refrigerants. Do not ever put a hydrocarbon into a non-hydrocarbon system, period. Let me see what else we got in here. I make mistakes all the time. So let me see. Okay, I'm going to get to my list of things right here. Limit switch failures. That's another one too. So in my recent video, I had to change the limit switch. And I don't know about you guys, but man, I work on a lot of the refrigeration stuff, and I've been seeing a lot of failures on the Heatcraft, the 5709 fan delay defrost termination switches. Boy, oh boy. Sometimes I've even had one that failed literally on install. The dang thing wouldn't work. I've been noticing a lot of limitations, and I'm waiting for the day. I mean, I know that you can replace the limit switch with like a key to therm evap well, you can put an evap efficiency controller on there. They also have a like the temp plus defrost control, but they have one for walk-in freezers. You know, it'd be smart to go with that, but I'd really like a solution. Ronco, I believe, makes defrost termination fan delay adjustable switch, but it's ridiculously expensive. So I'd like a mechanical adjustable fan delay defrost termination switch that's not in the encapsulated model, because I've been having a lot of issues with those 5709 switches. Great question I had on how to identify units on the roof when they are not labeled. Okay, that's a really good question, because that comes in a lot, whether it be an air conditioner or refrigeration system. Let's just call it an air conditioner. I go up onto the roof. The customer says their kitchen AC is not working. I go onto the roof. They've got 10 air conditioners on there, and they're all at the other end of the roof, and they're not over the respective areas of the building. Which unit goes to what? That's a good question, okay? In a perfect world, you have two people with you, and you have one guy downstairs turning on the thermostat. You have one guy on the roof. You turn off every unit, every thermostat, and you just turn on one, and you wait for each indoor blower motor to turn on. You identify them that way. If that doesn't work, you can, if depending on what type of thermostat it is, if you shut off the disconnect switch, the thermostat might turn off. That's another way. So there's a couple different methods you can do. You can also use an infrared laser gun and point it at supply grills. That's how you can figure out which supply grills feed what areas downstairs. When it comes to refrigeration systems, very similarly, you can turn off every unit and turn on one unit and figure out, you know, which evaporator controls what. You can turn thermostats on and off, see which one's running, which one's not running. But it really, really helps to have two people. I mean, worst case scenario, I guess you can have like a circuit tracer or some sort of digital meter or something like that, monitoring voltages, and you can turn things on and off on the roof. But ideally, if you have two people, it makes that job go so much easier. All right, let's see what else. What am I missing in here? What's my favorite beer? My favorite beer right now is a Rogue Hazelnut Brown. It's been my favorite beer for a while. It's a hazelnut flavored dark ale. Super good. Has a hint of coffee to it. It has been my go-to. It's from Rogue Brewing, I believe in Oregon, I think. But I like brown ales in general, so got to get off of that. Brown's a good one. There's a couple other ones that I really do dig too. Even like a Newcastle. Newcastle's a good one too. But Rogue Hazelnut Brown is my favorite all time right now. Am I also doing chilled water systems? No, I don't do chilled water right now. Let me see what else. All right. I misunderstood your question. You meant high chill minus 30 blend. Gabe R. I don't know what that means. But you mean a blend that's, I'm assuming you're talking about the mixing the R290 with 134A or something like that is what you were asking. I'm never going to replace with any hydrocarbon another refrigerant that wasn't a hydrocarbon. Send me an email, Gabe. That way, because I think I'm getting confused here. So hvacrvideos@gmail.com. Can you replace a reciprocating refrigeration compressor with a scroll compressor? Ooh, that's a good question. I've done that and it's ended in epic failure. So I had an old Carrier package unit that had a Tecumseh scroll compressor. Or no. It had a Tecumseh reciprocating compressor. And for whatever reason, I had to put in a scroll compressor. And what actually happened was the capacities weren't 100% matched up and there was some issues there, okay? And basically the unit would go off on high head pressure really quick, but then if you let it run for a while, it would stabilize out and everything was good. So you have to be very careful about replacing older reciprocating compressors with newer scroll compressors. You got to make sure that the system was designed for that amount of refrigerant flow through it and different stuff like that. On the newer systems, I wouldn't be too concerned with putting a scroll compressor in replacement of a reciprocating, but always consult the manufacturer. Your best bet is if you're using, if you can, get the Copeland mobile app if you're dealing with a Copeland compressor and find out what is the best bet and what is the replacement compressors for that particular situation. Let me see what I'm missing here. Okay, cool. All right. All right. So let me see what else we got going on in here. I answered that one. Okay, so I'll kind of answer this one a little bit. Someone said, which is better, an apprenticeship or a trade school? Both, they kind of work in conjunction. I kind of answered that one earlier, so I think that one's probably pretty good. The last question I had on my list was, do I recommend tightening belts versus replacing belts? So someone had emailed me saying that they saw me tighten a belt one time and they were always told that you're better off replacing a belt. So if you're the person that services that equipment all the time, I highly recommend, you're going to know that, hey, I've tightened this belt 3 times in the last 6 months. It's probably time to replace it. Because yeah, as you tighten a belt every time, the belt is getting stretched out. But do I necessarily change a belt every single time? No. I'll tighten it once or twice. You can, when you're comfortable with it, you can kind of tell when a belt's being stretched out. So no, I do not change a belt every single time. You really have to kind of look at the belt. Is it a really old belt, or is it a newer belt? Then, maybe you can just tighten it up and it'll be fine for now. So, all right. That's the list on my list. All right. Why are semi-hermetic compressors used in some applications over other styles? Sometimes I wonder that too. I mean, I imagine it has to do with the capacity delivered for that particular compressor, and the form factor of where they can fit it and where they can't fit it. Because I have a rack full of scroll compressors that has one semi-hermetic, but at the same time, I sometimes question, why is that in there and why didn't they go with the scroll compressor? The only thing I could assume is maybe they couldn't get the delivered BTU capacity that they needed at that time or something. So, all right, guys. Well, do I ever adjust settings into whack by ear in a pinch? Not really. I mean, I have in a pinch. I'm assuming you mean like just go and whack something or, just listen to how it turns on and off, just to get you by. I have, but I prefer to, do it proper because it tends to be I'm taking a guess and making sure, and I don't know for sure that it's going to work properly. So, all right, I am going to wrap this one up, guys. I think I just got a service call, so I'm going to have to go take care of this. I really, really appreciate you guys coming into here. I'm going to go ahead and cue up my outro music, and we are going to, let me turn that off, and I'm going to cue this up. And we will catch you guys on the next one. If I missed anything, send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com.